I started wealth creator coaching because I wanted to help business owners maximize the value of their business when they go to exit. Sooner or later, they're going to either pass that business on to somebody else, they're going to shut it down, or if they're smart and they want to maximize their wealth, they're going to sell it to somebody else. And I found that very few business owners think about that while they're running their business, where every decision they make today is going to impact exactly the value they're going to get later. So I also know from my own experience, having sold so many businesses, that if you do all the right things to maximize the value today and tomorrow, even if you're going to sell it years and years from now, you're going to enjoy a lot more cash flow. And I just found that there's a lot of business owners that don't think about those things while they're dealing with all the day-to-day stuff. The problem that Wealth Creator solves is really to get business owners to think about the goal they want. So I call it goal-focused thinking. Goal-focused thinking, GFT, it sounds like gift. It really is a gift. If every decision you make is analyzed from the perspective of, is it moving the business and the business owner closer to what they want or further away, that will help. And with full knowledge of what it is that increases or decreases the value of a business, we help them through that thinking. What I've learned is that a ton of business owners, unfortunately, use what we'll call subjective thinking instead of objective thinking when they're making their decisions. So what do I mean by that? Well, subjective thinking is really about, it's emotion-based, it's qualitative. It really comes from unfounded beliefs, is subjective. In comparison, objective would be quantitative, it would be provable, it would be fact-based, and ultimately it'll be verifiable. So when we think about how we go about making decisions, usually we don't have all the information. Too many of us, myself included, we let our beliefs drive our choice and our decisions, and it's ultimately the decisions we make that get us the results. So we have to ask ourselves, where do our beliefs come from and how can we make sure they're true? And one of the first services we offer our clients is the decision optimization coaching. And it really has to do with checking the thinking behind, the critical thinking behind any decision or the major decisions. What's been so fantastic about this service is that when we start doing it and our clients see it, they start finding money they didn't even know they were unnecessarily or unknowingly leaking away. And we help them identify those, plug the leaks, and they recapture the money. In terms of a return on investment, mathematically, it's infinity, the return on investment. Zero risk. You plug the hole, no more leaks, and you get that money. So you can enjoy more cash today, but it'll also drive a higher valuation. We designed Wealth Creator Coaching to serve businesses and business owners that have what I call significant growth and business opportunity challenges. That means their businesses are typically between 2 million and 300 million in revenues. So still smaller size compared, mid-size would be between say 300 million and a billion on the market cap. And then anything greater than a billion would be large cap. So we are looking to not startups. We don't really help companies under 2 million in revenues. We're looking for companies that already have sales and operations that are at least 2 million of revenues. And then we're looking for them to have at least 10 employees, or could be independent contractors. But we found that when you have less than that, the solutions we bring to the table aren't nearly as effective. Once you have at least 10 or more, the things we find and what we can do are significantly better, and the value we bring to the table is more obvious. I came into this idea for starting Wealth Creator Coaching because as an entrepreneur, and I've been a serial entrepreneur, I really, really wanted someone to helped check my thinking because I recognize that I have my own biases and my thinking something's going to be right and needing to move and being stressed. So I was looking for someone to critique my thinking and help me make better decisions. And I found that in a number of consultants. And I just thought that was super valuable. And I think more people need it. I started off working for a private equity firm doing acquisitions and restructurings. And then I went to business school and I worked for an investment bank owned by Barclays. So Barclays de Zoet Wed in their corporate finance side. And I helped take companies public and I helped them do merger and acquisition work and valuations. And I learned a whole lot of things about business. And then I became an entrepreneur and I've started, been co-founder or founder close to 20 businesses. And I've learned a ton. I made a lot of mistakes and I've also learned from other people's mistakes and I've enjoyed a fair amount of success. What I really bring to the table when I'm talking to my clients is a holistic view. I understand the financial part and the accounting part and all that goes into that. I also get the dark arts and the science involved in selling and buying businesses. And when I think about the stress of being a business owner and the challenges with people, I've been through it and I've learned a ton. And so by being able to take my operating hat, my financial hat, and my strategy hat and put those all together, I've got great feedback and referrals that are on our website from clients, and it's been really rewarding. Some of the biggest mistakes I've made, and many of the mistakes I've seen a lot of my clients and other business owners make, is, again, it goes back to that objective versus subjective decision making. And I'll call it ignorance. Ignorance, not in a bad pejorative way, but simply meaning that if we don't understand something, we might make an assumption and make a decision without understanding the consequences of that decision. So when we're looking at the mistakes that business owners make, a lot of it comes down to contextually who could give them the best advice and why is that good advice. So, for example, if you're got a business partner issue and you decide to buy out your partner and they don't necessarily want that, but you have the mechanism in your operating agreement to do it. And so you say, hey, we're going to have to part ways and here's the mechanism. I'm going to buy you out. You get a valuation done, or it might be in the agreement, and you go about doing that. You contact your lawyer because, well, it's a legal agreement. What might happen, and it often does, is that the lawyers, there's many types of lawyers, from litigation to business attorneys to intellectual property attorneys and on down the line. There's tax attorneys too. But attorneys tend to specialize. And so if you're talking to someone that's a business attorney and they're going to help you with your operating agreement or a partnership issue, they may not be thinking about the tax ramifications. So when they write the agreement, if you haven't talked to your tax CPA about how this could be handled, the difference between having your company buy back your partner shares versus you buying those shares versus, for example, doing it through a trust, all have different tax ramifications. And unless the wording is right inside of the agreement, done just the way you'd want it, it might limit what the accountants are able to do. The wording might actually benefit your partner and how they treat their tax, but it might dramatically harm you. You might pay 2 or 3 times more in tax, or it might prevent a transaction later on when you're trying to sell your business. So being able to think through talking to your attorney and your CPA and perhaps other people that are involved in whatever decision to make sure you're getting the right people at the table to give you advice, it's usually layers more complicated, and we want to just keep it simple and we want to save money and time, and so we call one person. I'm actually that person, even though I'm not a lawyer or a CPA. I'm the one that's been there, seen the mistakes, and I'll help direct you. There's a quote from Socrates that says, wisdom is knowing what we don't know. And the other side of that, I found that sticking your head in the sand and being ignorant of what we don't know is truly the definition of stupidity. I'm one of those people that have done it many times. I think I know something, but I'm not checking to make sure that I actually know it. And so it's what we don't know that we don't know that comes to bite us. So we don't know if our attorney has all the experience we want. They might be a friend. They might have been referred to us. We wouldn't even know how to go check to see if the attorney we're using has the right kind of merger and acquisition or business expertise and advice. Quite frankly, how many attorneys have started and run a business and have been in your shoes as a business owner? Very few. And the same thing for your CPA. So when somebody gives you advice, including me, if you hire me and I'm working with you and coaching you, question what you hear. The best thing we can do is be slightly more skeptical and ask for proof points. So that moves us along the scale towards being more objective in our thinking and shrewd businessman as compared to being more subjective and naive. Because when we trust the wrong people, I mean, they might be really nice and we might really like them, but if they give us bad advice, we only have ourselves to blame. Like later on, when it's all said and done, you could just say, oh, that so-and-so did this or that to me and gave me bad advice. But at the core, it was really our decision to take their advice, to even ask them. So one of the things I bring to the table is holistic thinking and questioning everything that matters that could have an impact, as compared to what I consider silo-based thinking, where we, inside of the organization, make a decision in one area that might dramatically impact another. And I can think of a really good example about that, where a pretty good friend of mine was running a business and their lead product, the first product and service they ever had, was going great. And then all of a sudden they started noticing sales were coming off. And so they got worried. They were launching new things, but their revenues were going down. And so the owner met with his VP of sales and they came up with a really good marketing plan. They literally said, hey, we're going to give, for every one that somebody buys, we'll give them a second product. We'll give them an extra incentive with a rebate on something when they refer it to another person. We'll just drive back more volume because clearly they need something to make it go. Well, that actually worked. They did see the revenues go up. Unfortunately, it almost bankrupted the company. All the unintended consequences of that decision, they never asked the question to find out that there was actually some quality issues in the manufacturing and the product was breaking down, so people were sending them back in returns. They were flooding the customer service area with calls. People were so unhappy that no one was listening inside the company that they had turnover. HR couldn't hire enough people. The whole thing came screaming back. And then while they got the sales numbers, they were just blowing through cash because of the shipping costs being sent back they were paying for. And then there was the social media impact of all the bad news they were getting for bad quality. So, silo-based thinking, they didn't ask the right questions. They didn't dig in and get to root cause. That happens a lot. Well, when it comes to maximizing the value of the business, I think we all have to take one step back. And one of the things I'm really keen on doing is educating my clients all about the aspects of valuation. So one of the first things that happens when I meet somebody new and I'm prospecting, they'll say, well, hey, I'm thinking about selling. Should I go get a valuation done? No, absolutely not. Why? I said, well, let me explain what a valuation is. A valuation report is theoretical. And it starts off, every one of them, I used to write them, and I've had many done for my own companies, but there's a reason. It starts off by saying value is what a at arm's length third party would pay for a business if they had all the available information. So the only way that ever happens is if somebody actually buys the business. That's reality. You only know what the value is if a transaction goes through. So why would anyone get a valuation? Okay, first, if you're going to say take the ownership of your company and move it into a trust, when you do that, you're definitively going to want to have a valuation because the IRS might challenge the valuation. In that case, you're trying to push the value down to get within the threshold of whatever you need to get it inside of that trust on a tax advantage basis. So you're going to need a valuation person who's really good in front of a court and a jury, because they're going to be your expert witness explaining how they came up with their valuation. So the more times they've been to court and the better they are in front of a jury or a judge, that's why you want that. The exact same thing's going to happen inside of, say, a partnership issue and you need a valuation done. Let's say they dispute it. Well, now you're going to have to go to court again. So you're going to need that valuation to be defensible. Same thing, say, in a divorce. I had a divorce. I had to get all my businesses valued and they're all not public, they're private. Well, so my ex-wife had her valuation experts. They pushed the value up, and my experts were keeping the value down. And then we were in front of the judge, and well, that's why you get a valuation done. When it comes to actually thinking about the reality of when you go to sell the business, what is going to drive the value? Okay, really crystal clear formula. The formula that's going to be used when someone buys your business is going to be the buyer's perception of the risk-adjusted present value of the expected future cash flows. All right, let's break that apart and let's look at it. Buyer. So first thing that's going to impact the valuation of your business, who's the buyer? You're going to have really sophisticated buyers that are private equity firms. And by the way, some of the dark arts. Later, I can tell you exactly how to get them to overpay. There's a secret. But the buyer, if you get an unsophisticated buyer, they might overpay or they might not know how much to pay. So it can be more challenging to deal with somebody who doesn't understand the techniques of valuation and doesn't have good advisors. So dealing with a sophisticated buyer is easier. They know what they're doing, but you might not get all the value you might from someone that's not as sophisticated. So buyer matters. The perception of the buyer. So buyer's perception. How do we shape perceptions? We were talking about that earlier. It's like the hall of mirrors. How do you create the belief? Well, there, you, in a way, have got to create the element in your story and credibility of there being scarcity. So the perception of it has to be that if I don't move, somebody else will, and I'm going to lose out on this. Fear of missing out, FOMO. So buyer's perception, okay, of the risk-adjusted. Now, risk is by far the biggest overall factor in evaluation. Because just think about it. Risk is reflected in interest rates, right? So if I'm a really good risk, the bank will loan to me at prime or the least amount. We all know that if we're a bad risk, we're going to go all the way up to subprime where we might have to pay 20%. We know that people that have bad credit pay more in interest rates. That's because they're riskier. So interest rates and risk are directly correlated. Valuation multiples are inversely correlated to risk or interest rates. So the lower the interest rate or lower the risk, the higher the multiple. The higher the risk, the lower the multiple, meaning the less they'll value it because they need to compensate them for more potential risk of it not working out. So risk is also about the economy. So if we just start and say, if it's 2008, the Great Recession, banks were just clamoring to get back their capital to stay alive. Some banks went under. What they had to do was just stop letting lines of credit go out. And many good businesses, friends of mine that had never violated a covenant on their banking terms, ever. And they were doing great. All of a sudden had their line of credit pulled by the bank, putting them in jeopardy because the bank needed to pull back the reserves because of bad loans the bank had made. So that was a big risk. We think borrowing money, yes, it's risky, but you never think about, and most people don't go back and remember what exactly happened in '08. But that's the point. Risk to the general economy will impact the stock market. If it impacts the stock market, if interest rates are going up because of inflation, well, there's going to be less merger and acquisition activity because big buyers use debt. Debt increases the cost if interest rates are higher. So the overall economy and the availability of capital, again, that's all risk related, impacts valuations. So all the way down when people are looking, risk is the single biggest factor in driving a valuation. There's also a perception of size of a business, bigger with more customers spread out across many things, different lines of revenue, bigger geography, is perceived as being less risky. So a small company that has a couple of customers, small amount of revenues, and a high concentration of those revenues within just a few, that's riskier because if they lose that customer, the business goes away. So size is again about risk. So those are some of the factors. Now, after you go risk adjusted, you go present value. So one way or the other, whether people recognize it or not, they're going to look at, just because all assets and all financial products, everything is valued on a perception of that stream of cash flows in the future, bringing it back to the present value. So there's a formula just about interest rates. What's something worth today is not the same thing as what it's worth tomorrow. We know that with the recent inflation. If I had, and I'm retired and I have fixed income, going to buy milk for $1, okay, that's in my budget, and I get $100 a month. So 1% of my budget goes to milk. If milk jumps to in the price in 3 years to $1.50, well, now milk is taking up much more of my budget. So everything that goes up in inflation, that's really what we're looking back to discount. So we know what the value is today based on how things will happen in the future. Okay, CPI. So present value. So now we've gone the buyer perception, risk adjusted present value. There's a formula for that of the future stream of cash flows. Okay, future stream is all the things that could happen. So again, what's going to impact the valuation? If your revenues are going up on a trend and have been going up, and when you meet with a prospective buyer, you can show them your CRM, customer relationship management system, and your sales leads gen, and you've got this funnel that's been working, and you can predict that you've got a bunch more revenues coming in the next year and the year after that, and you've got recurring revenue streams, and you're thinking, well, that future cash flow is more certain. So that looks really good. Cash flow is really after revenues and expenses, you have operating cash flow. People use the term EBITDA, and I have a whole separate video on EBITDA, but it's not an accounting term. It's not a generally accepted accounting term. It's actually made up. Now, why? Well, because it's earnings before interest, depreciation, tax, and amortization. Okay, why? Well, because tax might have tax loss carry forwards, might not. Taxes, everybody's got a different tax rate. So can't care about that. Why interest? Well, because paying a bank an interest rate versus paying a dividend to an owner is the same thing. One way or the other, they've got a claim on the asset. So your interest rates could differ, your line of credit could differ. So you want earnings before your interest as well. Depreciation is about how much you've invested, and then the tax allows you to depreciate so that you can write that off as an expense on your balance sheet. Well, it's not a cash item. It's just a metric to show the depreciating value of your assets. But a lot of times what the IRS or other people allow you to depreciate at, or the rules of accounting, have nothing to do with what's real in reality. Like a pipeline, you put a big pipeline, it costs you a lot of money and you get to depreciate a certain amount of it, say over 20 years. That pipeline might last 50 years. So yes, you got to reinvest in it and with a capital thing, but when you do that, you could go borrow the money. So depreciation doesn't matter. Amortization is really about intangibles like goodwill. Say you buy a company for more than the book value, that increases goodwill. Well, everybody's got a different amount of goodwill and it's non-cash. Same with you've got intellectual property. You're going to allow to take a amortization of the value of that intangible asset of your intellectual property. It's non-cash. So again, earnings before those things, because that's how much does your business generate in cash flow to be able to pay a bank or lenders if you wanted to use them, and to dividend out to owners who can then pay the tax. So that's why EBITDA is used. It's a proxy for operating cash flow. So why all that information? Because cash is king. Today, tomorrow, and every day until you sell. You want to make your decisions to absolutely drive more short, medium, and long-term cash flow. Focus on the long term, don't forget about the medium term, and don't shortchange yourself on the short term. So when you, again, go back and find money that you're unnecessarily and unknowingly giving away, when you do that, you immediately can put more cash in your pocket or reinvest in your business to increase its value. So therefore, to increase the value of a business, both today, tomorrow, in the medium term, and the long term when you go to exit, what Wealth Creator Coaching does is we do decision optimization coaching. We do employee loyalty programs. We do exit coaching, and we have a vault of wealth, which is all of our tools and all the cool stuff we've developed over the years that we've seen work to help companies do those things and increase the value of their business. Let me go through them one at a time. When we look at decision optimization, we spoke about it earlier, it's really about making excellent decisions that increase the value of the business in the short, medium, and long term, and not give away money unknowingly and unnecessarily, to make more objective decisions than subjective decisions, to make more holistic decisions than silo-based decisions. So that's the thing we're looking at doing. Right? And I'll stop for a second. If you think about your business as a raw diamond, because it is, it could become the most valuable business in the world. Other people have, so why not you? To do it, you have to take the raw diamond and make it valuable. You have to have it cut. And when they cut a diamond, they call them facets to create all the prisms and everything else. Well, your business is the same thing. You've got to make sure you've got a good architecture of when you cut or make a decision in one area and on one facet, holistically, it'll all come together. So that's what decision optimization coaching is all about. The second thing that we do is employee loyalty programs. So why? Well, when I first starting out, one of my mentors, actually it was when I was younger and I was thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and really wanted to. And I said, what's the secret to being successful at business? And one of the first billionaires in the world, actually at the time, and first one I ever met, said to me, Pierre, business is really simple. It's just solving problems. And I already know you're a good problem solver. But people are difficult. Employees, customers, suppliers, partners. That's what you've got to go focus on and figure out. Because if you can figure out people, then you could be successful at business. Wow, was he ever right? I heard that 40 years ago, and it is more true today than ever. So what I, in all of my entrepreneurial endeavors, have figured out is systems that align the interests of my key employees with mine as an owner. And I've taken that program and I've run it through a number of clients, and it's been really popular. And why? Because employees are the single biggest expense on most every business P&L. Employee benefits, the second biggest one. When you take all in and what we pay to the government, the commission that we pay them for the opportunity to hire people, well, we have our biggest expense right there. Wealth Creator Coaching's employee productivity and alignment programs, we help business owners maximize the alignment and the productivity out of the employees that they've hired. We help them hire better. We help them manage better. We just take a whole bunch of that pain out of it. Because quite frankly, I think of business as a game, and games should be fun. And for myself, some of the biggest employee challenges I had made it at times feel really not so much fun. So that's one of our primary objectives, is to drive more fun and more productivity and alignment and make everything easier so that business owners can enjoy more cash flow today, valuation today, all the way until they want to sell it. The third service that we have is exit coaching. And that's one of my favorites because it involves lots of dark arts and science. So I see myself, and it's been described to me as the deal whisperer. I think of the game of selling your business like an incredibly sophisticated game of poker. Problem for most people is that they play poker a little bit, but they haven't played all the different rules or all the different games. I mean, there's literally, I think, 180 different forms of poker and probably more. Most people have only seen on TV one version. So when you go to play poker, if you're sitting at the World Series of Poker and you've got professionals against you, they know what they're doing. The problem for most of us who don't play professionally every day and at that level is that we might make bad choices as to how we play the cards. Because I've done literally hundreds of merger and acquisition transactions in my lifetime worth billions of dollars, I've been at the table. So what I do is I whisper into the ears of my clients how to play their cards on every hand so that they can maximize the value of their business, how much they get paid, and they can get the best terms. Terms often matter a lot more than price, and people will be really shocked. But what's in the agreement and how they structure it is as important as the price. So Exit coaching from soup to nuts. We come in, we help. One of the things we do is we recommend that people hire an investment bank. Hire somebody that's got deep connectivity to the main buyers in the industry. And why is that? Because that reduces the perception of risk. Remember before, risk influences price? If the buyer knows the advisor, the investment banker in the space, and they've checked the boxes of doing their own due diligence and lining it up, that makes it seem safer to the buyer to pay more. If it's safer, they will pay more. So, why would you keep paying me if you're hiring an investment bank who could guide you? It's simply because the investment banker, because they're in that space and keep selling businesses to these types of buyers, while they're not always going to have the time to give you all the information you need when you need it to get the best deal for you. They may not care about that last million because their portion of it isn't that big comparatively. You care. They may not care as much once they get to the bigger numbers. It's here and there. I care because for me it's a game. I want to help you maximize that price and play the game right. So that's why you would want to hire an investment bank and us. We'll show you which ones, how to go find them, how to negotiate the deal, and we're with you the whole way until the deal is done. And then the final thing that we do is we offer this vault of wealth. We have a bunch of tools in there that just systems. One of them's for helping you make better choices when you hire. How do you go about hiring? What's the process? The second one that I can think of right off the top of my bat is a format that teaches everybody in your organization how to write down what the problem is and from the bottom up tell you what the recommended solution is and why and what are the alternatives. It helps better critical thinking. It helps make more objective decisions. It's just a better way of doing things. So we have a whole range of tools that we help our clients with. Some of you may wonder if I have any concrete examples of ways we've directly benefited our customers and what it is we did, how they benefited. And of course, we have really good testimonials on our website, and you would be welcome to call any of them, and I'm sure they would tell you what we've done. So I'll give you one example where I had the founder of a business. He was the CEO. He'd already sold a business before, and I started with him with the employee alignment and productivity, because he had some really difficult to find and really valuable employees that were going to be key to locking in if he wanted to sell and get the most price. So we designed up the program. He worked with me. We did that. And he ran into a partnership issue where some of his partners were enjoying the increasing cash flow from the group of business, but they weren't caring as much and accountable about the goals they'd set every year, and it was starting to eat at him because he felt he was working harder than they were, and they were benefiting from what he brought to the table. So we had a good meeting with partners, and we ultimately decided it'd be better if they split the businesses, and I helped orchestrate that and mitigate a lot of potential litigation that could have happened. So saved them millions on that entire endeavor. And then with the smaller group that he had, because he split off some to his partners, he decided that he was going to want to sell within the next year to two. And so we just began planning. He made it clear to me that he didn't want to stay with the business in an earnout. Now, the formula, the expected future cash flows, you can reduce the perception of risk in the eyes of the buyer if they were to have you pay, if they were paying part of the purchase price after the deal in an earnout. My client didn't want to do that. So we engineered him moving out of the CEO role into the chairman role of the operating holding company. So into the holding company, out of the operating company. And we moved his number two man into the CEO role a full year before we started marketing the deal, even before we hired the investment bank. And we just redid the accounting books. Now, they were consolidated between the holding company and the operating, so there was no restating for taxes or anything else. We just moved all of his expenses, benefits, salary, everything, bonuses, out of the operating company and put them in the holding company. And when they sold, well, they got paid 9 times EBITDA. So that entire, call it $500,000 of his expense multiplied by 9, that $4.5 million was added to the purchase price because it wasn't affecting the EBITDA. And they had a different CEO in role who wanted to stay with the business. So he was part of the earnout. And my client, who initially hired me, the founder, was sitting in the holding company and just got to be an advisor. The great deal for him was they still paid him as a consultant. He could work when he wanted to. He got the best of all worlds. And out of that deal, just on that transaction alone, we made him an extra $4.5 million. A few years ago, I experimented with doing some podcasting and had a really good time, but it wasn't very serious, and I just wanted to learn how to do it. So now with this podcast, the Wealth Creator Coaching Podcast, I'm going to be inviting a whole range of guests, friends of mine and other people I don't really know that well, but from private equity people who run really large private equity firms and acquire businesses all the time, to investment bankers who have done deals, to businessmen, entrepreneur like yourself, who have built businesses and sold them. And I'm going to have a whole range of guests on future episodes of our podcast. And I'm really excited for you to listen and learn and ask questions through our YouTube channel and on our other sites so we can address them. This is really important to me because I think there's a lot of money that's being left on the table by business owners while they run their businesses, and especially when they sell it. And I'm aiming to help those people who have been in the same shoes I walked in so that they don't have to make the same mistakes I made, or they can learn from others. And that's one of probably I think that quote comes from Warren Buffett. He said, it's important to learn from mistakes, and it's a whole lot better to learn from other people's mistakes. So with Wealth Creator Coaching, it's learn from my mistakes and the mistakes of others so you don't have to make them and pay such a heavy tuition or price of the learning. And then we're going to learn from our guests on the podcast. As I think about critical thinking and on that topic of learning and what I'm really after, it's the notion that great results come from great decisions. And great decisions come from great judgment. Great judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment or mistakes or bad decisions. Those all go together. So instead of making them yourself, you could learn from other people and go faster. That's the whole purpose of going to school, by the way. When we read a book, when we read lessons, we're learning from other people. So we don't have to pay the tuition. So that's really what I'm interested in doing, is helping business owners not have to make the same mistakes that I've made and other business owners have made, and so that you can leapfrog and go further, go faster. If you're interested in learning more about Wealth Creator Coaching and our services, go to our website, wealthcreatorcoaching.com, and click the Book a Call button. We'll schedule time to find out whether we're a good fit to work together, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much for listening.